What would you do if the HOA destroyed your family's barn without warning? For Raymond Brooks, the answer was simple. Turn the wheel of an old water valve and drain the very lake the community depended on. He pulled into the gravel drive just as the last rays of sunlight cut across the fields. For a second, everything looked wrong. The horizon wasn't the same as it had been that morning. The place felt hollow. When Raymond Brooks, 54 years old and bone-tired after a day of hauling feed to a supplier outside of town, stepped out of his pickup, he froze. Where his family's barn had stood for nearly a century, 3 generations of sweat and history, there was nothing but a flattened mess of boards, twisted tin roofing, and splintered beams. His mouth went dry. His knees buckled a little, and he gripped the truck door to steady himself. "What in the hell?" he muttered. Raymond dropped his work gloves on the ground and walked slowly toward the ruin, crunching glass under his boots. The air still smelled of diesel and sawdust. He saw tire tracks in the dirt, fresh ones, deep and wide, the kind heavy machinery leaves behind. That barn wasn't just a building. It had been the backbone of his life. Inside were his tractors, tools, a hay baler he'd spent years keeping alive, and boxes of keepsakes his late father left behind. He had rebuilt the roof himself after a storm back in '92. And now it was gone. Across the fence line, 3 figures stood near a black SUV with tinted windows. One of them was Karen Whitfield, the president of the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association. Her hair was pulled tight in a bun, her crisp blazer making her look more like a corporate lawyer than a neighbor. Next to her were 2 board members, arms crossed, satisfied expressions plastered on their faces. Raymond stormed toward them, fists clenched. "You did this!" His voice cracked as he shouted across the grass. Karen didn't flinch. "Mr. Brooks, the board voted unanimously. That structure violated the covenants. It was unsightly and, frankly, a hazard." Raymond's jaw trembled. "Unsightly? That barn was standing before a single one of your houses was even dreamed of. My father raised cattle here. My grandfather built that frame with his own hands. And you," he pointed at the wreckage, "you tore it down without even telling me?" One of the men, Douglas Crane, chimed in. "We mailed notices, Mr. Brooks, several actually. You ignored them. We were within our rights." Raymond laughed bitterly, but it wasn't joy. It was rage trying to hold itself together. "Your rights? On my land? You think because you people built a resort around a lake, you own everything that touches it?" Karen's voice sharpened. "Your property is within Lakewood's jurisdiction. You signed when the county approved annexation 10 years ago. You may not like it, but rules apply to everyone." Raymond stared at her, chest rising and falling. He wanted to curse, to swing, to do something. But all he managed was a hoarse whisper. "You just destroyed my family's history like it was nothing. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Karen's eyes stayed cold. "We've improved the community, Mr. Brooks. That's what we've done." Raymond turned back toward the pile of rubble, his boots dragging in the dirt. He kicked at a board and saw part of his father's old branding iron sticking out, bent in half by the bulldozer. He bent down and picked it up, holding it in his palm like a broken bone. The 3 HOA members got into their SUV, slammed the doors, and drove off without another word. Their taillights disappeared up the hill, leaving Raymond alone with the wreckage. He stood there for what felt like hours, the night closing in, crickets chirping around him. He thought about how much money this would cost, the work lost, the time wasted. But more than that, he thought about what had been stolen from him. Dignity, legacy, a piece of his father. He spat into the dirt, tossed the bent iron back into the pile, and whispered to himself, "They don't know who they're dealing with." The thing about Raymond was simple. He wasn't the kind of man to back down. He had lost before, but he had never lost quietly. And somewhere inside him, a thought began to stir, a memory of something forgotten. But he wasn't ready to act yet. First, he needed to remember the past that tied him to this land. Raymond couldn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table, the overhead bulb casting a yellow circle across stacks of bills and a chipped coffee mug that hadn't been washed in 2 days. He stared out the window toward the spot where the barn once stood. Without that tall frame cutting the horizon, the land looked smaller, almost unfamiliar. But he remembered everything. His father, Charles Brooks, used to wake him at dawn when he was a boy. "Get your boots on, Ray," he'd say, tugging at the boy's blanket. "The cows don't care that you want to sleep." Raymond would stumble out, still half asleep. But the barn was always there waiting. The smell of hay, the warmth of livestock in winter, the clatter of tools on wooden walls. It was home. When Charles died in 1999, Raymond inherited not just land, but responsibility. His father's voice echoed in his mind even now. "This ground will outlast us, son. Treat it right, and it'll take care of you." That barn was the anchor. Without it, everything felt untethered. Lakewood Estates hadn't even existed back then. The lake was created when the county dammed Pine Creek in the late 1980s, flooding hundreds of acres and leaving fertile farmland underwater. The Brooks farm had been spared, but the new shoreline cut close to his southern fence line. Developers saw opportunity in that shimmering water. Within 20 years, the place was unrecognizable. Where tobacco fields once stretched, million-dollar homes with private docks now stood. Raymond never fit in with the newcomers. He drove an old Ford pickup, wore boots with mud caked on them, and spoke plain. They drove imported SUVs and talked about property values over wine tastings. Still, he tried to keep peace until the HOA started sending letters. The letters came regular as the seasons, complaints about the appearance of his barn, about unapproved structures like his chicken coop, about noise violations when his dogs barked at coyotes in the middle of the night. Raymond ignored most of it. He wasn't part of their club. He hadn't bought in. His family had been there long before Lakewood was even on a map. He thought that made him untouchable. Clearly he'd been wrong. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, Raymond picked up the phone. He called his younger sister, Janine Douglas, who lived 40 miles away in Spartanburg. She answered groggily. "Ray? It's midnight. What's wrong?" "They tore it down, Janine." His voice cracked. "The barn's gone. HOA sent a crew while I was gone. Everything's gone." There was a long silence. Then Janine's voice sharpened. "What do you mean, gone?" "Bulldozed. Flattened. Like it never existed. They said it violated some rule." "That barn was Daddy's. That barn was ours. They can't do that." "They already did." Janine swore under her breath. "Ray, you've got to fight this. Take them to court." Raymond rubbed his forehead. "Court takes money. They know that. They think I'll just roll over." "Well, will you?" Raymond didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted to the dark outline of the lake, shimmering under the moonlight. That lake had once been his father's fishing hole, before the county expanded it with the dam. Back then, Charles had warned him about the new water valve they'd installed on their side of the property. Big steel wheel set into the ground, used to control levels when storms came. "Don't ever forget, Ray," his father had told him. "We still hold the rights to that valve. County made sure of it. Don't let anyone tell you different." Raymond had almost forgotten. Almost. But sitting there in the kitchen, staring at the glint of moonlight on the water, he remembered every word. He didn't tell Janine yet. Instead, he whispered, "No, I'm not rolling over. Not this time." Janine sighed. "Good. Because if Daddy was here, he'd raise hell. Don't let them erase us, Ray." When they hung up, Raymond stood at the window a long time. The land had changed, yes, but he still had one thing they didn't know about, one thing they couldn't control. But he wouldn't act on it just yet. First, the HOA had to feel like they'd won. The next morning, Raymond was back outside before the sun had fully climbed over the tree line. He walked slowly across the yard, kicking at stray planks left behind from the demolition. Every step felt heavier than the last. A century-old barn, gone in a single afternoon. He stopped and stared at a pile of crushed tin that used to be the roof. Pieces of his father's handwriting, labels scrawled on boxes, old receipts, were scattered in the dirt like trash. By 8 o'clock, word had already spread through Lakewood Estates. Pickup trucks and golf carts alike drifted by his driveway, neighbors slowing down just enough to catch a glimpse of the wreckage. Some looked away quickly, not wanting to meet his eyes. Others lingered, whispering to their passengers before pulling off. One neighbor, Ellen Strauss, pulled her silver Lexus to the edge of his property. Ellen was in her 60s, polite but sharp-tongued, known for organizing charity luncheons and sending out lengthy HOA newsletters. She stepped out, heels clicking against the gravel. "Raymond," she called gently. "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry." Raymond folded his arms. "Sorry doesn't bring it back." Ellen hesitated. "You know how it is. Some folks around here think appearances are everything, but not everyone agreed with Karen. Plenty of us thought that barn had character." Raymond's eyes narrowed. "Character? That barn wasn't decoration. It was my life. My tools, my equipment, my history. They didn't just take down a building. They took part of my family." Ellen pressed her lips together. She looked like she wanted to say more, but she retreated. "I'll see what I can do at the next board meeting." She climbed back into her car and drove off. Raymond muttered under his breath. Board meeting. Always meetings, never a damn ounce of common sense. As the morning dragged on, the loss hit harder. He tried to salvage what he could, stacked broken beams, pulled nails from planks, but everything smelled of fuel and splintered dreams. By noon, sweat ran down his back, and frustration boiled over. He hurled a bent shovel across the dirt, letting out a raw yell that startled a flock of crows into flight. That was when his closest neighbor, Samuel Price, strolled up from the adjoining field. Sam was one of the few old-timers left, a retired electrician with rough hands and a kind heart. "Ray," Sam said quietly, leaning against the fence. "I saw the trucks yesterday. Couldn't believe it." Raymond wiped his face with a rag. "Believe it. They didn't even warn me. Came home to rubble." Sam shook his head. "They've been pushing for years. You were the last holdout. Barn was in their way of keeping everything shiny for the tourists." Raymond squatted down, picked up a twisted latch from the dirt, and held it out. "See this? My dad built this gate by hand. They didn't just flatten wood. They flattened him." Sam stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "You gonna fight them?" Raymond looked toward the lake shimmering in the distance. "They think I can't. That I don't have the money or the stomach for lawyers." Sam followed his gaze. "You still got that old valve, don't you? Heard your daddy mention it once." Raymond turned to him slowly, narrowing his eyes. "Funny you remember that." Sam shrugged. "I remember everything your daddy told me. He said the county gave your family maintenance rights in writing. No one else knows it's still good. That's power, Ray. More than any lawsuit." Raymond didn't answer right away. The idea had already been circling in his head since the night before. But hearing Sam say it out loud made it real. "You're telling me to use it?" Raymond asked. Sam's face hardened. "I'm telling you they won't stop until you push back. They'll take every inch you give them. Sometimes you've got to remind people whose ground they're standing on." The words hung heavy in the air. Raymond turned back toward the pile of rubble, his heart pounding. The HOA thought they'd buried him, but maybe they'd only woken something up. That afternoon, as HOA members held an emergency luncheon at the clubhouse, Raymond noticed their cars lined up in neat rows. He could almost hear their smug voices inside, congratulating each other on ridding the neighborhood of his eyesore. He tightened his jaw. They had power in numbers, sure, but he had something far greater: control over the very lake they built their empire around. But before he turned that wheel, he wanted them to feel safe, like they'd finally won, so that when the water started dropping, it would hit them like thunder. The lake shimmered that evening as the sun sank low, throwing orange streaks across the water. From a distance it looked peaceful, perfect even. Families grilled on their decks, children splashed near their docks, and couples paddled out in kayaks. To them, Lakewood Estates was a picture of comfort. To Raymond, it was a reminder of what had been stolen. He stood at the edge of his property, staring down the slope where tall grass hid a rusted steel door bolted into concrete. The old water control valve. Most people didn't even know it existed. To Raymond, it had been part of his childhood. He remembered the day his father showed it to him. He must have been 12. Charles had led him down through thick brush, the smell of mud and honeysuckle heavy in the air. "This here," Charles had said, patting the cool steel, "is the lever that keeps their paradise afloat. They dammed Pine Creek to build this lake. But the county kept us responsible for this valve. If the water rises too high, we release it. Simple as that. Raymond had asked, "Why us?" His father grinned. "Because our land touches the source. They had no choice. Remember this, son. They might build around us, but they don't own us. We've got roots deeper than their foundations." Now, decades later, Raymond knelt beside that same steel door. The weeds brushed against his arms, the metal cool under his fingers. The wheel was big, painted once in red, but now eaten with rust. He gave it a small tug just to test, and it groaned like an old beast waking up. He let go quickly, his heart pounding. The temptation was real. He could already imagine the docks tilting, the HOA's pristine shoreline turning into cracked mud. He could picture Karen Whitfield's face when her kingdom started to drain away. But another thought crept in. If he really did it, there'd be consequences. He'd be called reckless, dangerous. They might even try to arrest him. And yet, sitting idle felt worse. Later that night, Raymond called Janine again. She answered on the second ring. "You sound restless," she said. "I found it," he admitted. "The valve. Still works. Still ours." Janine exhaled slowly. "Ray, you're not seriously thinking about it, are you?" "They took everything from me, Janine. That barn was my whole life. They walked all over me like I didn't matter." "I get it," she said firmly. "But draining their lake? That's not small. That's going to hit more than just them. What about families who don't care about the HOA politics? Kids who swim there? People who fish?" Raymond paced the kitchen. "You think I don't know that? But you didn't see their faces when they watched it fall. They didn't see me as a man. They saw me as an obstacle. I can't let that stand." There was silence on the line, then Janine's voice softened. "Just promise me if you do anything, you'll think about what Daddy would say." Raymond stopped pacing. His father's voice echoed in his mind again. "Don't let anyone tell you different." He ended the call, unable to answer her. The next morning, Raymond stopped by Sam Price's place. Sam was already on his porch with a cup of coffee, looking like he'd been waiting for him. "You couldn't sleep either, huh?" Sam asked. "Not a wink," Raymond admitted. He sat on the steps, elbows on his knees. "I went down there last night. Put my hand on the wheel." Sam raised an eyebrow. "And?" "And I nearly turned it." Sam studied him, then sipped his coffee. "You turn that wheel, you'll change everything. They'll never see you the same again." "That's the point," Raymond snapped. "They see me as weak. They see me as disposable. Maybe it's time they see me as the man who holds the key to their lake." Sam leaned closer. "Just make sure you're ready for what comes after. You think they were ruthless with your barn? Wait until you threaten their property values. They'll come at you with lawyers, sheriffs, whatever they can." Raymond's jaw tightened. "I've been bullied long enough." Sam didn't argue further. He just nodded toward the slope. "Then go on. Remind them who they're messing with." That evening, Raymond stood at the valve again, the lake calm above, the rusted wheel beneath his hands. For a long time he just stared, his pulse beating in his ears. He thought about his father, about the barn, about Karen's cold voice. He tightened his grip, and this time, he didn't let go. The wheel turned slowly at first, groaning under the pressure. Then smoother. A rush of water gurgled through the pipes below, echoing in the earth. Raymond stepped back, breathing hard as the sound grew louder. The lake had been theirs for too long. Now, it was his move. But he didn't yet realize how fast the water would fall, or how quickly the HOA's panic would spread. By morning, the change was impossible to ignore. The sun reflected off rippling water that no longer lapped against the docks but sat nearly 2 feet lower than it had the day before. Wooden piers stuck out awkwardly, their support posts exposed like bare bones. At first, residents thought it was just the summer heat. "Evaporation," some muttered as they watered their lawns. But by noon, as boats tilted sideways in their slips, whispers spread like wildfire. Something was wrong. Raymond watched it all unfold from his porch. He sat in an old rocking chair, a mug of black coffee in his hand, pretending not to notice the parade of SUVs creeping past his driveway. Neighbors pointed at the lake, then at him. Some even slowed down, glaring, as if they already suspected. By mid-afternoon, the HOA's emergency group chat was in overdrive. Karen Whitfield was the loudest voice, firing off messages about unexplained water loss and possible interference. Within hours, she had scheduled a board meeting at the Lakewood clubhouse. Raymond chuckled to himself as he read the flyer slipped under his mailbox. Urgent meeting tonight. Attendance strongly encouraged. Around 5 o'clock, Sam Price stopped by. He leaned against the porch railing, squinting at the sinking shoreline. "You really did it." Raymond didn't deny it. "Turned it halfway last night, just enough to get their attention." Sam shook his head, half smiling. "Well, you've got it now. They're squawking like hens at a hawk's shadow. Whole community's in an uproar." Raymond sipped his coffee. "Good. Let them panic. Maybe now they'll think twice about tearing down something that wasn't theirs to touch." Sam hesitated. "I'll say this, Ray. You've got guts. But this is a line you can't uncross." Raymond set his mug down. "I know. That's the point." That evening, the clubhouse parking lot overflowed with shiny vehicles. Men in golf shirts and women in sundresses filed inside, voices sharp with frustration. At the front of the room, Karen stood like a general before her troops. "This is sabotage," she declared. "The water levels are dropping abnormally fast. We've already lost several feet. Property values are at risk, and tourism could be affected if this continues. We must identify the cause immediately." Douglas Crane raised a hand. "Could it be a leak in the dam?" Karen shook her head. "I've already contacted the county. No reported issues, no storms, no breaches. That leaves one possibility. Tampering." Murmurs filled the room. A woman in the back spoke up. "Are you saying someone's draining the lake? Who would even know how?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Someone with access. Someone who's been less than cooperative with this association." Whispers rippled. Several heads turned toward the window, where Raymond's property sat beyond the tree line. "Brooks," someone muttered. Karen seized the moment. "Exactly. Mr. Brooks has a history of non-compliance. His property sits on the original dam easement. I wouldn't be surprised if he still has control over that old valve." Gasps spread across the room. One man stood up angrily. "If he's responsible, he's endangering all of us. My family rents our house to vacationers. They'll demand refunds if this keeps up." Karen slammed her folder shut. "Then we'll hold him accountable. I'll call a special council with the county first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, keep eyes on that shoreline. If you see him anywhere near the valve, report it immediately." While the board whipped the neighborhood into frenzy, Raymond sat quietly on his porch. He could hear faint echoes of their meeting drifting across the water. He didn't need to hear every word. He knew exactly what they were saying. Janine called him later that night. "Ray, they're pointing fingers at you already. I saw a post on their Facebook page. People are saying you're behind it." Raymond leaned back, staring at the stars. "Let them say it. They're not wrong." Her voice grew anxious. "You can't just admit it, Ray. They'll come after you with lawsuits, maybe even charges." "They came after me first," he said flatly. "All I'm doing is reminding them who they're messing with." Janine was quiet, then whispered, "Daddy would have understood, but he also would have warned you. You've got to think 3 steps ahead. What happens when they call the county? When deputies come knocking?" Raymond's voice hardened. "Then I'll show them what real leverage looks like." He hung up and walked back to the valve. This time, under the cover of night, he gripped the wheel with both hands and turned it further. Water thundered through unseen pipes, rushing out into Pine Creek below. He could almost hear the lake groan as it lowered another notch. For the first time in days, Raymond smiled. He didn't feel powerless anymore, but his victory would not stay quiet for long. The HOA's panic was only just beginning. By the following morning, Lakewood Estates was in chaos. Overnight, the lake had dropped another 2 feet. The polished wooden docks that once floated gracefully on the water now sat tilted, their posts creaking under uneven weight. Kayaks and paddleboards were stranded in mud, and the smell of wet earth replaced the usual fresh water scent. At the upscale vacation rentals along the North Shore, Visitors from Charlotte and Raleigh were furious. A group of renters crowded the property manager's office, demanding answers. One man in a polo shouted, "I paid $2,000 for a week on the water. What am I supposed to tell my kids? They can't even swim now." Another woman chimed in, "My boat's stuck in the muck. Who's going to pay for the damages?" The manager, sweating, could only stammer that the HOA was looking into it. Meanwhile, Karen Whitfield was already on the phone with county officials, her voice sharp and unyielding. "You don't understand," she snapped. "We have homeowners losing thousands of dollars daily. This is a crisis. I want action immediately." On the other end of the line, a county engineer tried to calm her. "Mrs. Whitfield, our inspection shows the dam itself is intact. If water is draining, it's from the auxiliary valve on the Brooks property. That valve is technically under his family's maintenance.